Welcome back guys for another episode of Mortal Realms Monday. I'm the Rogue Painter and today we're going to be painting the Dreadblade Harrows from issue 14 of Mortal Realms magazine. So I'm just applying a quick coat of Hexwraith Flame here over a Corax white base. I think I did hand paint this one as I'm out of white spray paint, but the any kind of white paint undercoat will do. It'll give it a nice effect. I wouldn't use a dark colour with this. I would stick to white as a base coat for this. Otherwise the Hexwraith Flame won't pick off those highlights quite the same. So yeah, I'll just give the entire horse coat of this, and obviously allow that to dry before moving on to the next step. Okay, so next up I'm going to take some Incubi Darkness and I'm going to apply 2 or 3 coats of this. This is slightly thinned down. We don't want to apply this in one thick coat. The idea is to cover the majority of the horse and fade it out as you start to get to the flames around his hooves and the back legs and the tail and his mane. So yeah, obviously leaving the Hexwraith Flame on those flame areas. What I find is with the first coat, get it down to almost where you want it, and then you can see I'm just using my finger just to dab it back slightly. And with subsequent coats or layers, I'll stop slightly shy of that, and then with a damp brush, clean damp brush, I'll just drag some of that paint down towards the flame, which will thin it out, and it'll give a nice transition towards the flame. But if you are using this thin enough anyway, so you can see how I've dried it, and now I'm just dabbing down and just spreading it out around that area, and then I can neaten it up with additional layers. And you can also see that it does go on a little bit patchy the first few coats, but that does neaten up once you get a few layers on. So we'll now skip ahead and we can see what it looks like once it's had a few layers. Okay, so once that's done, we're now going to take some Sotek green and we're just going to dry brush this over all of the Incubi Darkness, and this will give it a nice little bit of highlight, not only to the sharp edges but also the flatter areas as well, sort of those rounded off areas. Obviously with dry brushing you want to make sure that you don't have too much paint on the brush. Do try to remove as much as possible, and then just go backwards and forwards over all of the Incubi Darkness, and get a nice blend of it. You can do this with a ever so slightly damp brush, and what that will do is take away that chalky edge to the dry brushing, but you do have to be very careful that it is just ever so damp. Otherwise too much water and you're not gonna get a dry brush effect to it. Right, so once that's done, next up I take some Ahriman blue, and this is going to be for those extreme highlights just around the rib area and things like that. So again, I'm just dry brushing on those areas that I want to catch those sharp areas. Obviously being careful not to go over. You don't want to overdo this. It's just for some highlights, and then we will go back later with a smaller, finer brush and just really pick off some sharp edges with that. Okay, so once that's done, I'm now taking some Phalanx yellow and just dry brushing the ends of the Hexwraith flame, and then working slightly up towards the middle area of the flame. All we're doing is just trying to add a little bit of extra glow to the end of the flames here, so they're not just that solid, that Hexwraith green. So do be careful with how much paint you do have on your brush here. You'll also note that I'm holding the model rather than just the holder here. This is to support it, as it's only attached to the base with that one front leg, and in particular if you're brushing the back end of it too hard and you can see that it starts to vibrate, and I was worried about snapping the leg there. So I do recommend, if you're going to brush heavily on that back end, to just support the front end, that front leg a little bit, to avoid risk of snapping the leg. It is very flimsy. Right, and for the final dry brush on this area, we're going to take some ceramite white. Now I didn't apply, rinse my brush fully from the yellow, as I wanted a slight tint to the white. I didn't want a pure white on there, and so that's given it a bit of a yellowy tone. And then obviously dried the brush as much as I could, and then went into the white. But I did apply the white to the palette first. I did not dip the dirty brush into the white pot, as obviously that would taint the pot. So as you can see, I'm just going over the flame areas here, concentrating more on the tips, and then just obviously slightly fading it up along the flame, and that just dulls down that yellow just a little bit, so it's not so bright and in your face. Alright, so next up I take some Tbone, and this is going to be used for the head of the horse and all of the bone areas. So the rib cage here, and like I say, the skull of the horse. You could do the horse in the same Incubi Darkness blue if you wanted to, but I like the idea that it looked more bone-like, so we went with the Tbone here. So again, slightly thinned down, couple of layers as always, and get a nice even coat on there. Right, and once that's done, we take some Seraphim Sepia, and I am taking this straight from the pot here, and just applying it nice and liberal over all of the bone areas, getting that washed down into those recesses, and staining up that Tbone to give it a bit more of an earthy bone look. So again, not much to do here. Just straight over those areas, and then allow it, 5-10 minutes to dry before carrying on with the next step. Right, so next up is some Abaddon Black, and this is going to be for any of those metal areas, as well as the leather straps around the horse's face, and also his hooves along the front there. Obviously his back turns into flames, so we don't need to worry about those back there. So yeah, just again, simple coat over all the reins and the hooves, and we'll be back in just a second. Okay, so once the black is done, it's now back to the Tbone, and I'm just touching up the ribs, leaving some of that dark wash nearer the edges, the outside edges, and then the same with the skull, just picking off those top highlights, along the bone areas, and then I do thin it down slightly just to brush down the flat area on top of the skull, just as that I feel that looks a little bit too dark for such a large flat area. Okay, so now going back to the Ahriman Blue with a smaller brush, I'm just going to pick off the edges around the ripped skin, just to add some highlight to those extreme sharp edges of obviously this is on any of the skin tears and some of the thicker areas or the sharper edges along the legs there. So I'll just go ahead and do that, obviously on both sides, and we'll jump back in just a bit. Okay, so we're almost done with the horse, and then we can move on to the rider himself. But next up, we've got some Balthazar gold, and we're just going to apply that to the reins here, just the ones with the stud areas on it, and the round disc that sits just behind the horse's eye. And what we're going to do is use this Balthazar gold to give it more of a brass sort of coppery look rather than actual gold, and then with the disc we'll give that a little bit more of a goldish look. So again, same on both sides of the reins, just going to apply this gold, and then we'll be back. Okay, so with that done, we're now going to take a bit of iron breaker, and this is just for the metal rings that join the leather straps. Try and get me words out there. That join the leather straps to the reins. So it's just a couple of the rings there, and that will be that done. Nice and easy. Okay, and for the final stages of the horse, or for now at least, we're just going to apply a wash of Agrax Earthshade over all of those metal areas, and that will just tone down that gold and sort of dirty it up a little bit. So then we just let that dry for a few minutes, and we can move on to the rider. Okay, so now that the horse is done, it's time to move on to the rider. So I've taken some Aethermatic blue here, and I've already gone ahead and done the inside of the model, and this is the reason that we had the rider separate from the horse, not only so we could get to the back of the horse easy, but so we could also make sure that we get a coat of this on the inside. Nothing special, just applying a thin layer of it over all of the ghostly part of him, ignoring obviously the hood and the sword, but making sure that you do get the hands and arms on this. But just a nice even wash all over it, and then allow it time to dry, and then we will come back in just a tick. Okay, so now I'm going to take some Nighthaunt's Gloom, and I'm just applying this to the very top of the ghostly area here, just as it meets the hood. And all I've done is thinned it down slightly, so I am working from the palette, not the pot. And what I do is apply it quite heavily towards the hooded area, and then you can see that I sort of speckle it down along the area that as it blends into the Aethermatic blue. What I also do is the same technique as I did with the horse. I will quickly rinse off the brush just by sort of up and down in a pot of water a couple of times, dry it on a paper towel just ever so slightly. We do want a bit of a damp brush, and then I'll feather the gloom down using the water down into using the damp brush down into the Aethermatic blue. Sorry, I forgot what it was then. What that will do is that will allow some of that gloom to bleed down into the blue, and it will thin it out slightly and give it a nice soft transition from that heavier blue into the lighter one. And then I will go back over and do it a couple more times just to make sure that we get that dark sort of under hood area with a nice soft blend down into the Aethermatic. So you can see here, barely any paint on the brush. This is just sort of a damp brush, and then you can see I've blended it down into it. Okay, so now I'm going to take some Ceramite white and a medium dry brush, And yep, you guessed it, we're going to dry brush. So I'm just dry brushing this over the ends of the ethereal part, the spooky part of the rider here, and just sort of obviously blending that up as we work our way up the model, but concentrating the majority of that down on those tips, just to give them a white out effect. Obviously I'm not too bothered about getting deep into the inside of the model here, as it's going to be on the horse's back, but you do want to get the tips, as those do pull away from the horse slightly, and you don't want just a single coat of paint in there. Right, so I'll just carry on with this and we'll jump back in just a minute. Okay, so you can see here now that I've attached the model to the horse. This will make it easier for painting the remaining parts, and I'm now taking some Rhinox hide and going to apply this over the hood, the robe of the rider here. So again, thin down slightly with water just to get a nice consistency there, and apply a couple of layers, being very careful not to get it onto anything I've already painted. We do not want to get that onto that blue area, as it will make touching up a little bit difficult. So I'm going to go ahead and get a couple of layers on this, and we'll be back in just a bit. Okay, so next up I'm taking some Balthazar gold and just going over the guard of the sword here, as well as the hilt and that small strip that looks like it has studs on it that goes around the top edge of his hood there, just above his face. And I'll also apply this as some edge highlighting on the reins of the horse. Not too heavy with it, but just a small amount, just to bring some of that wash down a little bit and brighten the edge up. So I'll get on with this and I'll catch you guys in just a sec. Okay, so next up I've taken some Iron Breaker and applied this to the blade of the sword, and I'm now just doing the helmet here. Again, just a thin coat on this. It doesn't take too much with the metallic paints. Usually one layer is enough, but if you do need to apply two, then obviously go ahead and do that. Okay, so I'm now taking some Evil Sun Scarlet, and I'm going to mix this in a 2:1 ratio with Rhinox hide. That's 2 part Rhinox hide, 1 part Evil Sun Scarlet, just to give it a little bit more of a brighter red tint. And then, as you can see, I am carefully dry brushing this over the cloak, just to pick off some of those edges and just give it a bit more texture. The chalky effect, I find, gives a nice effect to cloth and material and stuff, so I'm not too bothered with the dampened brush for dry brushing on areas like this. Okay, so next up I'm going to take some Agrax Earthshade, and I'm just going to apply this all along the blade and the handguard area that we painted up, as well as his mask and the rim of his hood. And this is just to, you know, darken up those dips and cracks and stuff, and dirty down that silver a little bit. We're not going for a clean look here. He is an undead or a dead figure, so his weapons, they're going to be old and rusty and, you know, a bit worn down and beaten up. Okay, so I'm now going to take some Gehenna's Gold, I think that's how you pronounce it, and just apply very top highlight to some of these brassy, coppery areas, and obviously along the edges of the veins there. not too much to do, nice and simple, just some light highlights. Right, and now to age up those metals with some Nyaluk oxide. So obviously you don't want to overdo this, just apply it to I find around any sort of rivets and things like that, as well as anywhere that water would tend to collect and then sort of erode the metal. You can obviously sort of speckle it along areas. I find along the blade of the sword, just in some of those dips, and then like I say, just around some of those rivets along the veins and that. So not a lot, just a small amount. Okay, and now for some rust effect. I find that Scrag Brown works really well for this, and as you can see, I'm using a completely beaten up old round brush. This has paint down in the furrow, so the bristles have really separated on the ends, and then I just stipple it along the blade, and obviously anywhere else where you would normally want it, and that does give a nice little rust effect along the blade there. So nice and easy, quick and simple. Right, and over the top of that I apply some volcanic orange from Reaper Miniatures Master Series Paints Bones line, and again same thing, just stippling it over the top, and that is the rust effect finished. Right, and here is the finished model. Obviously I've gone ahead and painted the base off camera, as I've painted a few of these textured bases now for my videos, so you guys already know what you're doing. However, if you would like to see me include the base painting side of this in future videos, let me know down in the comments below, and I'll be sure to include those for you guys. So yeah, that's the end of today's video. Thanks a lot for joining me once again, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that thumbs up, and you know, leave some feedback down in the comments below, what you liked about the video, what you don't like about the video, so that I can improve future videos. And if you're not already subscribed, please consider hitting that subscribe button. I'm working my way to my first 100 subscribers, so that I can get that custom URL for easier promotion and advertisement and that. And I've got a few extra videos, non Mortal Realms related, coming up, so you know, it'll be good to hit that subscription, hit that notification bell, and you'll get notifications of when new videos go up. Obviously Mortal Realms is every Monday, and yeah, that's all for today, guys. Thanks a lot for joining me, and get working on that pile of shame. Get those minis painted. Until next time, take it easy, guys.